They killed Big Bertha. That 8-pound bass came to my dock every morning for 3 years. I named her, fed her, watched her glide through clear water like she owned the place. And now she floated belly up among 200 others, victims of someone's arrogance. The smell hit before the sight did. That sharp metallic tang of copper sulfate mixed with rot and guilt. I stood there at sunrise, boots sinking into damp earth, cradling Bertha's slick body in my hands. Her silver scales caught the early light like broken glass. My lake, the one my grandfather dug by hand in '52, now looked like antifreeze. Had finally gone too far. The HOA president who thought she could own the whole world had dumped $3,500 worth of industrial into my spring-fed lake overnight. And as I stared at the chemical sheen drifting across the surface, I realized something darkly poetic. Pristine subdivision, 847 identical houses with manicured lawns and overpriced fountains, pulled every drop of its drinking water from the same underground spring that fed this lake. Every single drop. She hadn't just poisoned my fish, she poisoned her entire kingdom. That's the thing about arrogance, it circles back, always. The morning air was still, too still. Even the birds seemed to know something sacred had been broken. My wife, Sandra, called from the porch, her voice trembling. What happened? I didn't answer. There were no words big enough to fit that moment. Just silence, the creak of the old dock, and the soft slap of poisoned water against wood. You ever have a neighbor so obsessed with control they start believing they own your sky, your ground, your peace? That was a woman who spoke in legal terms, smiled like she was auditioning for a commercial, and treated community meetings like courtroom battles. I'm Reed, 52, retired electrician. Grew up fixing things with my hands and minding my own damn business. My 12 acres and this lake were the last piece of old, a pocket of calm surrounded by a world addicted to HOA newsletters and noise complaints. When moved in 2 years ago, she treated me like a weed in her garden of perfection. She sent letters, unsightly fishing activities, property value disruption, even one claiming my dock violated community aesthetics. The irony, my dock's older than she is. At first, I laughed it off, but then came the chainsaws. Every morning, right as I cast my line, her landscapers fired up an orchestra of engines on her side of the fence. Diesel fumes mixing with honeysuckle, the noise drilling straight into my patience. I kept telling myself, ignore it. Stay calm, she'll get bored. She didn't. The day a county inspector showed up because of her anonymous complaint, I realized I was in for war. The poor guy looked at my permits, apologized, and muttered something about neighbors with too much time. That's when I saw standing on her porch, arms crossed, smirking like she'd just won a trial. I remember thinking, some people don't want peace, they want control. But control has a cost. As I looked out over that toxic lake, my rage cooled into something sharper. A thought, a truth. Her fancy homes, her perfect lawns, her bottled water arrogance, all of it depended on my spring. The same veins of limestone running under this soil carried water straight to her taps. For 70 years, this land had been my family's quiet legacy. Now it was a weapon, and she didn't even know it. The sun climbed higher, turning the chemical water into a mirror of pale green fire. My reflection looked back at me, tired eyes, clenched jaw, and a question forming in my mind. How far would I go to make her understand what she'd done? The wind shifted, carrying that bitter metallic scent toward the subdivision. A symbolic reminder that karma doesn't always wait. Sometimes it flows straight through your pipes. And as I watched another fish surface, lifeless, its gills tinted blue, I whispered almost to the wind itself, "You wanted control, now you're gonna drink it." Because the truth was already moving underground, drop by poison drop. The night before the poison, I remember how peaceful it was. The moon had painted the lake silver, and Big Bertha made her usual slow circle under the dock lights. I tossed her a handful of pellets and whispered, "See you at sunrise, girl." Funny how life gives you last moments without telling you they're the last. By morning, everything that made this place home was dead. The county environmental officer took his samples, shook his head, and said words like felony contamination. industrial-grade copper sulfate, and ecosystem sterilization. I just stood there, boots planted on gravel my grandfather had laid 70 years ago, trying to breathe through a throat that felt lined with fire. Anger can make a man do stupid things, or it can wake him up. That night while Sandra slept, I sat at the kitchen table with the deed folder I'd pulled from the safe, brittle papers that smelled of dust and history. My grandfather, Henry Reed, had been a man who believed in two things: land and water. And right there beneath his old signature were the words that would change everything, including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground springs and tributaries there too. Those legal lines didn't just define property, they defined destiny. I realized something chilling. The subdivision's husband helped develop 15 years ago wasn't just near my spring. It was on top of it. And they'd never bought water rights. Every glass of water in those 847 houses, every shower, every pot of coffee came from my grandfather's spring, from my lake, from me. It was supposed to be a moment of satisfaction. It was. It was grief mixed with grim clarity, because the same veins of limestone carrying her poison into their pipes were still running through my land. Her crime didn't just take my peace, it infected everything connected to me. I needed proof before I made a move, so I called Tom Martinez, my lawyer buddy, an old friend from high school who still owed me for rewiring his cabin years ago. "Tom, I think my lake's water feeds Willow Creek Estates," I told him. He paused for a long time, then in that slow southern drawl of his said, "If that's true, she didn't just break environmental law, she just committed a federal crime against herself." By sunrise, I was already driving toward the county courthouse, a dull gray building that smelled like old paper and bureaucracy. The basement files were colder than a morgue, boxes stacked like tombstones. But after hours of flipping through deeds, permits, and survey maps, I found it, the original 1952 record of ownership. The exact same clause my grandfather had left behind. Water rights in perpetuity. Forever. My fingers trembled holding it, not from anger this time, from the weight of it. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. That evening I walked the edge of the poisoned lake, the sunset staining the surface blood red. His voice echoed faintly from across the water. She was on her patio, laughing with friends, champagne glasses clinking. I could almost hear her arrogance carried on the wind. I knelt by the water, dipped my hand in, and felt the slick chemical film slide between my fingers. My reflection stared back, part man, part ghost. "You did this," I whispered, "but you're going to answer for it." The next few days were quiet, too quiet, like the calm before a storm that hasn't decided who it's coming for. I spent them gathering documents, water samples, camera footage from my neighbor's doorbell that caught the Clearwater Solutions truck at 2:17. Two people in suits, dumping toxins into the lake. 26 minutes of destruction. When I showed that footage to Tom, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slow. He said, "This ain't a dispute anymore, this is criminal warfare." The word warfare hung in the air like gunpowder. And for the first time since Big Bertha floated to the surface, I stopped feeling helpless. I stopped being the victim. Because sometimes justice isn't found in the courtroom. It's found in the quiet planning of a man who's been pushed too far. Thought she'd buried me under paperwork and poison. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't imagine, was that the very thing she tried to destroy was the thing keeping her world alive. And I was done being quiet. You know that strange silence before a storm breaks, when even the birds stop talking like they can feel what's about to happen? That's what it felt like standing on my porch the morning after I discovered the truth about the water rights. The air was heavy, still. My lake lay there in shades of pale green, silent and deadly. Sandra handed me a cup of coffee and said softly, "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one that means you're about to do something no one can undo." She wasn't wrong. I spent that morning on the phone with Tom, my lawyer. His tone carried that mix of awe and disbelief lawyers get when they realize they're standing next to a legal. He said, "Your grandfather didn't just own this lake, he owned every drop that feeds it. That aquifer runs straight beneath Willow Creek Estates. They've been using your water for 15 years. I set my mug down slow. The ceramic clink echoed in the kitchen. So technically, I said, they've been stealing from me. He chuckled, the kind of low, incredulous laugh people make when they realize how deep karma runs. Not just stealing. They've built an entire community on stolen resources. This isn't just property law anymore, it's federal. You could own their entire water system if you wanted. That sentence hung in the air like thunder. I didn't want revenge, not yet. What I wanted was balance, proof. A plan that didn't destroy innocent families but made the guilty ones choke on their arrogance. So I called in a favor from a hydrologist I'd met years ago installing solar panels on his research cabin, Dr. James Mitchell. The man treated groundwater like religion. He showed up with a van full of sensors, tubes, and gadgets that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. We walked along the bank together, boots crunching through gravel and soft mud. "This lake's got veins," he said, driving a steel probe into the ground. "The spring flows east, directly under Willow Creek. Everything connects down there like arteries feeding a body." He pulled the probe out and wiped it clean. "If someone poisoned your lake, that contamination is traveling through every home within 2 miles. I didn't say anything. The sound of water lapping against the dock filled the silence. That night I sat at the kitchen table again, the same table where my grandfather used to count fish hooks and jot notes about rainfall. Except this time the stakes weren't about weather. It was about justice. I drafted letters, official, polite, and devastating, requests for certified water testing, notices of property rights inquiry. Subpoena templates Tom helped me write. My handwriting was slow, deliberate, and steady. Each stroke felt like a hammer strike on a coffin of corruption. The next morning I watched from the porch as the mail truck carried those letters down the dusty road toward Willow Creek. I remember thinking, this is what power feels like when you've earned it. Quiet, heavy, righteous. 2 days later called. Her voice came sharp, cold, controlled, the sound of someone pretending they aren't terrified. "I received something interesting in the mail," she said. "A notice claiming water ownership of the subdivision. Surely this is a mistake." "Not a mistake," I said. "Just documentation." "You're bluffing." "Then check your deed." Silence, just the faint hum of her expensive home line, and in the distance, the muffled echo of sprinklers, pumping my water across her perfect lawn. I said quietly, "You've spent months trying to destroy me over 6 inches of dock space, but you never realized the ground you built your empire on isn't yours." She laughed short and brittle. "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I?" The line went dead. For the first time in months, I smiled. Over the next few days, whispers spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Homeowners were suddenly concerned about possible water rights complications. HOA members were asking questions couldn't answer. Real estate agents stopped returning her calls. The woman who ruled through fear was now ruled by it. And I wasn't even finished. Because justice, like groundwater, moves slow, unseen, unstoppable, and waiting for the right pressure to break the surface. The lake was quiet that evening, almost calm again. A soft wind brushed the cypress branches, and for the first time since the poisoning, I saw something shimmer near the surface. A small silver fish, alive, darting beneath the reflection of the moon. Life finds a way. And as I stood there in the pale light, I whispered to the night, "Your water's coming for you." The funny thing about power is, when you finally get it, you don't need to shout. You just act, quietly, deliberately. By the end of that week, I had proof, water test results confirming copper sulfate levels 4 times above EPA safety limits. Dr. Mitchell's report was clinical, almost cold. Immediate public health concern. Contamination confirmed across aquifer line extending under Willow Creek Estates. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the silence from side. I called Tom that night. He picked up on the second ring, voice low like he already knew. "Ready to go nuclear?" he asked. I looked out the window. The moonlight glinted off the poisoned water, still carrying that faint metallic shimmer. "Yeah," I said. But I'm not just blowing her up. I'm rebuilding everything she tried to ruin. That's when the plan really began. Step 1, assemble the truth. Step 2, let it speak louder than revenge. Tom reached out to an environmental lawyer he knew from Raleigh tours. She was the kind of person who didn't blink when facing corporations or politicians. When we met, she shook my hand with a grip that meant business. Her voice was calm, precise, surgical. "Mr. Reed," she said, flipping through the deed, "this is the most airtight water rights clause I've seen in 20 years. They've been stealing from you, every drop, every month, every homeowner." She paused, eyes narrowing. "And now, they're drinking poison that originated from the water you own." She didn't say the word karma, but it hung in the air anyway. Leaned back in her chair. "We don't just file a lawsuit, we make it impossible for them to hide. Federal, state, and civil actions all at once. We'll give them nowhere to run." The idea made my chest tighten, not from fear, but from clarity. This wasn't vengeance anymore, it was consequence. She called it a strategic cascade. File the water rights claim, trigger EPA intervention, and let the dominoes fall. While she built the legal wall, I called Dr. Mitchell back. He returned with a portable lab and spent hours mapping the underground flow with sensors that beeped softly in the dirt. When he was done, he stood there by the lake, wiping sweat from his forehead, and said, "This spring is like a bloodstream. Whatever she dumped here is already beneath their lawns. In 6 to 8 weeks, that contamination will be in every kitchen tap." "Then she poisoned her own neighborhood," I said quietly. He nodded, "And you can prove it." The next person to join was someone I didn't expect, Sarah Morgan, an investigative journalist I'd met years ago when she covered a solar energy fraud story. When she saw my evidence, her expression changed from curiosity to awe. "An HOA president poisoning her own subdivision. You realize this could be national news." "I don't want fame," I said. "I want accountability." She smiled. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Sarah was relentless. Within a week, she dug up history, 3 other neighborhoods, 2 harassment suits, 1 near restraining order. The woman had a pattern. She built power, abused it, and walked away before anyone caught on. Not this time. We met in my kitchen, Tom with his legal pad, with her laptop, Dr. Mitchell surrounded by soil samples, Sarah typing furiously on her tablet. The hum of my old fridge filled the gaps between their voices. It felt less like a meeting and more like a mission. "This isn't about taking down a person," said finally. "It's about setting a precedent. You want justice. We'll give you justice that echoes beyond this neighborhood." That word echoes stuck with me because the spring didn't just feed water. It carried stories, memories, consequences. Over the next few days, the pieces started aligning. Tom drafted the counter-lawsuit for harassment and environmental destruction, prepared the federal filing. Dr. Mitchell's report tied the contamination to the subdivision's wells. Sarah had already written the first draft of her, waiting for the moment the story would break. All I had to do was wait. But waiting's dangerous when your enemy starts to panic. The night before we filed, I found a note under my windshield. "Stop fishing or face the consequences." No signature, just the faint smell of perfume. I stood there under the porch light, staring at that paper trembling in the breeze, and I almost laughed. After everything she'd done, this was all she had left, empty threats written by a woman already drowning in her own poison. I folded it, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and whispered to the darkness, "You'll face yours soon enough." The next morning, hit submit on the federal filing. The papers went out like ripples across still water. And somewhere across the lake, I imagined pouring her morning coffee, made from the same poisoned water she'd used to destroy mine. You ever watch a storm roll in so slowly you can feel it breathing down your neck before it even hits? That was the week after we filed. The first sign came on a Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee on the porch when a white pickup rolled down my driveway, county seal on the door, mud on the tires. Out stepped Officer Jim, environmental investigator. He was one of those old-school guys with sunburned skin and the patience of a man who's seen it all. He didn't say much at first, just stood there scanning the lake like a detective at a crime scene. Then he knelt, scooped a handful of water into a clear vial, and shook his head. "That smell, that's copper sulfate," he said quietly. "Industrial grade. Whoever did this wasn't cleaning up algae. They were committing a felony." He looked up at me. "You got any idea who'd do something like this, Mr. Reed?" I didn't blink. "Yeah, I do." The words left my mouth slow, steady, like a man who'd already buried his fear and was done pretending. By noon, more trucks arrived, county health, EPA field agents, wildlife inspectors. My front yard looked like a government parade. They set up tents, cameras, sampling kits. The air filled with the hum of generators and the faint hiss of pressurized testing equipment. I stood by the dock, arms crossed, watching the professionals comb through what used to be my sanctuary. Walked up after a few hours, his face grim. "This contamination didn't come from runoff. It's deliberate. Someone paid a company to dump it." I handed him a printed still from my neighbor's doorbell footage, the Clearwater Solutions truck, time-stamped 2/17. His eyebrows shot up. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "This'll make one hell of a report." 2 days later, they confirmed it officially. Industrial poisoning, a federal environmental crime. The next time I saw, she was standing in her driveway across the lake, hands on hips, phone pressed to her ear. She looked smaller now, not in height, but in presence. That perfect posture she used to carry like armor had started to sag under invisible weight. Her sprinklers came on behind her, spraying neat arcs across the grass, her perfect lawn drinking from the same spring she'd poisoned. I couldn't help thinking, that's karma in liquid form. By the weekend, the dominoes started falling. EPA agents began knocking on doors throughout Willow Creek estates, asking residents about unusual water taste, discoloration, or odor. Social media lit up like wildfire. Posts about weird-smelling tap water, metallic coffee, and sick pets flooded the neighborhood group page. Tried to control the narrative. She posted a polished statement. "Minor mineral fluctuations due to seasonal change. HOA has everything under control." Control, that word again. The one she clung to like it could keep her above the rising tide. But truth doesn't care about spin. By Monday, 2 families had taken their kids to urgent care for stomach pain. A local news station picked up the story. Residents concerned about possible water contamination in Willow Creek estates. The footage showed an EPA truck parked outside the neighborhood entrance, the logo gleaming in the sunlight like a badge of judgment. I watched the report from my living room. Sandra sat beside me, her hand on mine. The anchor's voice carried that careful neutrality only reporters use when they're standing on the edge of a scandal. Sources confirm the subdivision's water supply may be linked to contamination from a nearby private lake. The investigation is ongoing. His name wasn't mentioned yet, but I knew it was coming. That night my phone buzzed, a blocked number. Her voice cracked, the confidence gone. "We need to talk." "About what?" "You've made a mistake. You don't understand the damage you're causing." I almost laughed. "The damage I'm causing, you killed my lake." "I was trying to protect the community," she snapped, her tone swinging from fear to fury. "Do you think anyone going to thank you when property values collapse, when the media turns this into a circus?" I said slowly, "that people deserve to know who poisoned their kids drinking water." The silence that followed felt like a confession. Then the line went dead. For the first time in months, I slept easy. The next morning, I got a call from Dr. Mitchell. He said, his tone sharp, urgent. "The contamination's spreading faster than we thought. We've traced the plume. Within 2 weeks, their wells will hit critical levels." He paused. "You were right all along." Outside, the wind rippled across the poisoned lake. It carried a faint metallic scent toward Willow Creek, a whisper of karma in motion. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt inevitable. Because sometimes the universe doesn't need your help delivering justice. It just needs patience. And patience was something I'd learned from every quiet morning spent waiting for a fish to bite. When people start to lose control, they don't admit it, they double down. 2 days after the EPA trucks rolled in, the neighborhood Facebook page lit up like a bonfire soaked in gasoline. Post after post, residents complaining about metallic-tasting coffee, kids with stomach aches, rashes, even a dog refusing to drink from its bowl. And in the middle of the chaos, there she was, still trying to spin gold from sewage. "Please remain calm," she wrote. "The HOA is handling the issue. These are temporary fluctuations in groundwater caused by weather changes." Weather changes. She was poisoning 847 homes and blaming the clouds. But panic doesn't care about public relations. Parents were calling doctors. News crews were calling residents. And the woman who once ruled that subdivision like a monarch couldn't silence the noise anymore. By Thursday, EPA officials had traced the contamination to its source, my lake, and I knew what was coming next. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I heard footsteps crunching up my driveway. When I opened the door, was standing there again, same sunburned face, same steady eyes. He didn't smile this time. He said, "I thought you'd want to see this." He handed me a copy of the EPA preliminary findings. The words jumped off the page: source, unauthorized dumping of industrial clear water solutions under direction of a private homeowner within Willow Creek Estates. I didn't need to guess which homeowner. I exhaled slow. "You've got her, don't you?" He nodded. "We've got everything but the motive. That's your department." I looked out past him at the poisoned water, the reflection of orange clouds rippling in the still surface. Oh, she had motive. Ego, that's always where it starts. After he left, I sat on the porch with Sandra. She handed me a glass of iced tea, her fingers brushing mine. "You think she knows?" "She knows," I said quietly. "She just doesn't know how much worse it's about to get." Because karma doesn't hit all at once. It drips steady, merciless, and always downhill. By Saturday morning, had started calling around to lawyers, contractors, anyone who might save her image. One of my neighbors, Morgan, later told me she'd seen packing her driveway for hours, phone pressed to her ear, shouting at someone to make the records disappear. Those records turned out to be invoices, clear water solutions, service logs. What she didn't realize was that the company's owner had already handed everything to the EPA, including the audio recording of her voice authorizing the emergency treatment and offering to pay in cash. Her cover-up had just become a confession. Sarah Morgan, the journalist, was on it immediately. By Monday morning, she'd secured an exclusive interview with one of the clear water technicians. On camera, he described how a well-dressed woman in pearls had met them at the lakeside at 2 a.m., claiming she was authorized by the HOA. She'd even signed the job order with the name B. The clip went viral before noon. I watched it from the kitchen, the sound of the fridge humming beneath the anchor's voice. His neighbors were outside, standing in clusters, whispering, gesturing toward her house like it was a crime scene. Her kingdom was crumbling, not in one explosion, but in quiet public humiliation. By midweek, the county board held an emergency meeting. The EPA's public notice labeled the contamination a Class 1 environmental hazard. Every homeowner was instructed to stop using tap water immediately. Bottled water deliveries lined the curbs like tombstones. Property values plunged overnight. And through it all, tried to hold on to her throne. She posted one final message online, long, rambling, desperate. She blamed an unhinged neighbor spreading false claims, accused outsiders of tampering with the water, and called herself a victim of a smear campaign. It was the digital equivalent of a queen screaming from a burning balcony. That night I stood by the lake, wind stirring the cattails, moonlight glinting off the surface. The air still smelled faintly of chemicals, but under it, there was something new: hope. Dr. Mitchell's latest test showed early signs of recovery. The contamination was slowing. Nature, stubborn and forgiving, was beginning to fight back. I thought of my grandfather, how he used to tell me, "Water remembers." And standing there, listening to the quiet lapping against the dock, I realized something deeper. So does justice. I wasn't done yet. There was still one more truth hadn't faced. the one buried in old paperwork, the one that would break her clean in half. Because she still didn't know who really owned the water that ran through every pipe in her neighborhood. That truth was coming next, and it was going to hit harder than any chemical she'd ever poured. There's a special kind of quiet the morning before everything changes. Not peaceful, just heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. That's how it felt the day I decided to show my cards. For months had weaponized power, paperwork, and poison. Now she was about to learn what real power looked like, written in ink 70 years old and backed by the earth itself. Tom met me at the courthouse parking lot, a battered briefcase in hand. He looked tired but alive, the way a man looks when he knows he's about to win something bigger than a lawsuit. "You ready?" he asked. "Been ready since she killed my lake," I said. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as we filed our claim. Handled the federal paperwork. Tom oversaw the county filings. The sound of stamps hitting documents was the most satisfying rhythm I'd ever heard, each one a nail sealing the coffin on her empire. By noon, it was official. The Reed family owned every legal right to the underground spring system feeding Willow Creek estates. Every faucet, every shower, every lawn sprinkler belonged to me. Glanced up from the final signature. "Congratulations, Mr. Reed. You just became the most important man in this county's water board." The weight of it hit me slow. All those years of being told to shut up, sit down, stop fishing. And now, without raising my voice, I controlled the one thing no one in Willow Creek could live without. We didn't announce it right away. Wanted timing. "Let her think she still has control," she said. "When the EPA releases their final contamination report, we'll combine it with your ownership filing. The story will explode on its own." And explode it did. 3 days later, local news ran the headline. "Environmental disaster tied to HOA president, source water rights owned by neighbor she harassed." I watched it unfold on live TV. They showed drone footage of my lake, still tinted faintly green, and overlaid my grandfather's deed beside the contamination map. Then they said it out loud. "All homes in Willow Creek estates draw from the Reed Spring, privately owned by Reed since 1952. I don't think I breathed for a full minute. Sandra's hand found mine. "She's finished," she whispered. Out there in the subdivision, s phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Within hours, she called an emergency HOA meeting. Residents packed the community hall, cameras rolling, voices rising. From the back row, Morgan recorded every word. Stood at the podium in that same ivory suit she wore for every victory speech. But this time, the fabric couldn't hide the tremor in her hands. "This is misinformation," she shouted. "That man doesn't own our water." Tom leaned against the wall, whispering beside me, "Wait for it." Raised her phone, projecting my deed onto the screen behind. The room went silent. The legal language appeared in black letters that might as well have been scripture. "All water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereto, in perpetuity." In perpetuity. Forever. The crowd erupted, questions, anger, fear. Someone yelled, "So we've been paying HOA dues to poison a lake we don't even own." Another voice cut through the noise. "You told us it was city water." Tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She knocked over her glass, hands shaking. "He forged that deed," she screamed. I stepped forward then, slow, steady. "Go ahead, tell them I forged my grandfather's signature from 1952. Tell them the county recorder's office and the EPA are lying, too." Every eye in that hall turned toward me. "You didn't just ruin a lake," I said quietly. "You contaminated every home built on stolen water, and now you'll answer for every child who got sick, every fish that died, every lie you told to stay in power." Her lips trembled. "You think you've won?" I shook my head. "No, I think justice finally remembered my address." The sheriff stepped forward, same one who'd served her court papers months earlier. "Mrs.," he said, voice firm, You're under arrest for environmental crimes, obstruction, and misuse of HOA funds. Gasps filled the room, cameras flashed. Froze, then hissed, "This isn't over." I looked her in the eye. "It is for you." As the deputies led her out, the same people who once feared her turned their backs. The sound of her heels on the tile echoed like the closing credits of a bad movie. Outside, the afternoon light hit the pavement like molten gold. I could smell honeysuckle again. The first time in months the air didn't reek of chemicals. Tom handed me a folded newspaper. "You realize this case will be cited for decades, right?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but right now I just want my lake back." He nodded, "And you'll get it." That night I sat on the dock, listening to frogs return to the shallows. The water was healing. So was I. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it ripples. And when it finally reaches shore, it's quiet, sure, and undeniable. 6 months later, the lake finally smelled like life again. The sharp chemical sting was gone, replaced by that clean mineral scent I remembered from my childhood, cool, fresh, honest. Early sunlight shimmered across the surface, turning the water gold. A heron glided low, wings slicing through the morning haze, and for the first time in almost a year I heard the sound I'd missed most, the soft splash of fish breaking the surface. Big Bertha's descendants. The restoration team had released hundreds of native bass fingerlings last week. Watching them flicker beneath the ripples felt like seeing old friends come home. Sandra stood beside me, her hand tucked into mine. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I whispered, "we did." Dr. Mitchell's bioremediation plan had worked faster than anyone expected. Oxygenation systems, aquatic plants, and natural bacteria that ate through the lingering copper sulfate. Within 5 months, the EPA tests showed contamination levels had dropped to 0. The county even renamed the site Reed Spring Preserve. It was strange how the place looked almost identical, same dock, same trees, yet felt completely different. Maybe it wasn't the lake that had changed. Maybe it was me. I thought back to the day it all began, holding Big Bertha's lifeless body, watching that antifreeze-colored water shimmer under a cruel sunrise. I'd felt powerless then, broken, angry, but somewhere between revenge and justice, I'd learned something else entirely. Sometimes power isn't about control. It's about stewardship, protecting what outlasts you. Never learned that lesson. She pleaded guilty to environmental destruction, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. The judge called her actions a monument to arrogance. 3 years federal prison, 5 years probation, $75,000 in restitution, and 200 hours of community service cleaning riverbanks. Her law license, gone. Her husband filed for divorce within weeks. Their McMansion sold to pay legal fees. The same woman who once bragged about aesthetic compliance standards was now wearing an orange vest, picking up trash beside county roads. Karma doesn't miss appointments. But even in all that vindication, I didn't feel joy, just closure. The settlement negotiated turned out better than I'd dreamed. Instead of demanding back payments from 847 homeowners, we funneled restitution and HOA insurance funds into something lasting, the Grandfather's Lake Environmental Trust. Every local school now brings kids here twice a month to learn about water conservation, ecosystems, and property rights. They fish off the same dock my grandfather built in 1952, their laughter echoing across the water like a promise. And every time a child releases a fish back into the lake, I feel like another piece of this place heals. The community changed, too. Willow Creek Estates disbanded its old HOA board and rebuilt it from scratch, transparency clauses, open voting, homeowner rights protections. They even formed a volunteer committee to monitor environmental compliance. Irony at its finest. The same neighborhood that once treated me like an outsider now invites me to their annual Clean Water Festival. I go every year, not as a hero, just as a neighbor. Sarah Morgan's made national news. HOA president poisons own neighborhood in property dispute. It went viral, sparking state-level HOA reform legislation. Now, in North Carolina, Every HOA must disclose environmental impacts, limit retroactive property control, and publicly post financial decisions. Its name became the cautionary tale that fixed a broken system. Sometimes one person's destruction builds the bridge everyone else walks safely across. Now when the sun dips low and the water glows orange, I still sit on that dock with Sandra. The boards feel smooth again, warm under our feet. Kids fish along the shore, their voices blending with birdsong and the soft creak of cypress branches. The lake feels alive, maybe even grateful. Sandra nudges me sometimes, smiling. You ever think your grandfather imagined all this? I shake my head. He just wanted a place to fish. Guess we built a legacy instead. The camera of life always circles back, framing endings where they began. The first time I stood here, I held death in my hands, Big Bertha, lifeless and heavy. Now, as a new bass leaps through the air, scales flashing silver in the sunlight, I realize I'm holding something else entirely. Renewal. Maybe that's what justice really is, not punishment, but restoration. I stand, cast my line, and watch the ripples spread outward. The circles widen, fade, then blend back into calm water. Somewhere beneath the surface, life goes on, quiet, resilient, eternal. And as the wind moves through the trees, carrying that clean scent of honeysuckle and spring water, I can almost hear my grandfather's voice. Water remembers, boy, so does the truth. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next mystery on HOA Hunter Stories.